Hey guys, today we're going to be chatting with not a designer or a researcher, but a founder and a technologist who has built a consumer insights platform called AI Palette, an AI powered deep tech startup. The reason I chose to speak with him is because his vision has been to democratize consumer understanding, a topic that I'm deeply passionate about. And he has cracked this with the help of generative AI and agentic AI technology. So let's gear up and learn from him. Hi, Manshu. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi Juneja. Thank you so much for the opportunity and looking forward to our conversation.
I'm actually very excited to share to our listeners the true capability of AI Palette. So, can you share with us what exactly is AI Palette and what it helps us achieve?
Sure. So, at a very high level, what we are really doing is we are turning the internet into the world's largest always on focus group. Right now, if you talk about traditionally how the consumer research is being done, where you are essentially designing like a survey, and then you would recruit your team and respondents, and then you would wait for weeks or even months for that matter. You would analyze the results, and by the time the insights would come out, the market would have already moved on, right? And today, if you look at the consumers, they're constantly expressing their preferences online, and their preferences are also changing very fast. Now all of this is happening on social media, search platform, review platform, whether it is recipe, menu, and e-commerce. So
Mhm.
what we have really built at AI Palette is an AI engine that can ingest millions of these, you can say, conversations, raw conversations, every single day, and then translating them into structured actionable insights for the brands. So instead of asking what do the customers or consumers really want, we observe what they are already doing. And this particular shift is very powerful because firstly it's a real behavior. It's not about just claiming the intent to be there. Secondly, it's continuous, so it's not getting outdated, unlike a traditional research report. And the
Mhm.
third, it is really really fast, right? I mean, it's a matter of hours and days and weeks compared to like the months and quarters that would take in a traditional market research. So for the CPG brand, this means that they are able to spot the trends which are much more earlier in the product lifecycle journey before they actually go into the mainstream process. So the overall objective which AI Pilot is really fulfilling is we are moving from a reactive market research to more of a predictive intelligence and a predictive market research.
Got it. Can you elaborate on what a reactive market research is? And or if you can take us to the journey of traditionally how would they spot trends? And with this AI palette, how has that behavior shifted in organizations?
Got it. Got it. So essentially, if you think about the traditional market research, right? So I think the first biggest challenge in these traditional research companies is that by the time you run the surveys or the focus group, the
Mhm.
trends have already become old news. And the innovation cycle, they really need weeks and days and not like the quarters and the month, right? So that is one big challenge, which is more about the speed.
Mhm.
Second is the scale, right? Now, when you are doing these traditional market research, you're speaking to maybe a set of 500 customers or maybe 1,000 at max.
Yeah.
And in a country like India or China, where you have billions of population and millions of users who are online, speaking to just 100 or 500 or 1,000 is not representative enough, right? So it's just a very tiny sample, or a tiny drop of water in a ocean full of insights, so to speak, right? So it's again a challenge related to the scale part of it. And the third is the bias itself, right? So when we were building out the AI palette, we spoke to like multiple research teams and the innovation team. So for example, when we spoke to the Unilever Vietnam team, they talked about how they have stopped doing the traditional market research, because every time when they would go to the consumer surveys, everyone would give a thumbs up, right?
Mhm.
And when they would launch the product in the market, the product would actually bomb, right? And that made them feel that the people are becoming more biased towards giving like a positive feedback, because they are also getting paid when they are giving these surveys and feedback and all that, right? So
Mhm.
essentially this bias was also one of the big challenges which was there in the traditional market research. So overall, if you look at these three factors, which is the factor of speed or the scale or the bias, This
Okay.
is more of a reactive approach, because either you are talking to the consumers about what is already happening, or you are talking to a very small sample set, and you are not able to understand and predict what is going to happen, right? So this is the biggest challenge today with the traditional market research, which is again a 100-year-old process, right? And has not seen a lot of changes which have happened in the digital world, so to speak. So with AI Palette, what we really built out was a AI first approach of the market research process itself, where AI would be used to predict these trends or these signals and identify them much early on, and then crunch down the time itself, which is going to take from months and quarters down to like the weeks and the days.
Got it. Got it. So, what I'm understanding is that, so even in research, we have this concept that the participant pool that you do the research on will bias the entire product and the strategy, right? And we have to identify the right participant pool. So, when you are identifying trends,
Hmm.
will you be missing out certain kinds of people? Like, is it inclusive enough? For example, if you look at
Yeah.
Coke, they have tier 3 and tier 2 as also a part of a large of their consumer base.
Yeah.
Will you end up like neglecting and not including consumers who are not in the digital space? Is that a concern?
Got it. Yeah. So I think one of the things which typically happens, and not just for India as a geography, but even for the global world, is that trends are typically starting from the metros and the tier 1 cities, right? And specifically from there, then they trickle down to the tier 2 and the tier 3. So today, if you could look at a tier 2 or a tier 3 person, they will be looking up to what is happening in the tier 1 as a aspirational, and then trying to really understand what is happening there, right? So that's one way to think about how you are really capturing it. But if I
Got it.
talk about the AI Palette way of how do we ensure the bias is not there in the data itself, right? So we have multiple lenses under which we look at the data itself, right? Now, the first lens under which we look at the data is the category representation. So, for example, what I mean by the category is, if I talk about the food, right, you have multiple type of the food. You have beverage, you have alcoholic beverage, confectionery, and so on and so forth, right?
Mhm.
Now, within beverage also, if you go deeper, right, you will have coffee, tea, energy drink, hydration, and all of that. And if you go further beyond the coffee, you will see cappuccino, latte, mocha, and all of that. So what we are really doing when we are collecting these data, right, we are ensuring that there is enough representation happening from these different subcategory and subcategory, right? So that's one way in which we are ensuring that bias does not come up, and only one type of subcategory is not dominating the entire insights, right? So that's one. The second lens that we do, and this is typically for a larger geography like India, USA, or even China for that matter, which is where we are looking at multiple metro cities, and then we are also looking at the tier 2 and tier 3, because there also we have enough signals which are out there. So for example, if I talk about India, we would not just look at what is happening in Delhi, what is happening in Mumbai, Bangalore, and all that, but we would also look at what's happening in Jaipur, what's happening in Ahmedabad, right? So that's one way of us trying to also understand these local nuances and the regional trends which are there. So for example, using our platform, one of the customers actually tried to understand what's happening in the Northeast as a region, right? So they were able to look at what's happening in Guwahati, what is happening in Kolkata, and then also the some of the other states which are there. So that's one another lens using which the bias we are trying to reduce in the data, right? Which is the regional level. And the final lens is the brand lens. Now the brand lens again is very, very important, because typically when we are collecting the data, we are also ensuring it's not just about only the major brands, right? Like the Coca-Cola or the Pepsis of the world, but also looking at the up and coming brands, right? For example, whether it is Paper Boat or whether it is Sleepy Owl as an example, right? So all of these D2C brands are also getting the representation in the data. So these are the three lenses across which we are collecting the data, and then of course processing the data, which allows us to ensure that there is not biases creeping in the data itself.
Got it. So how many categories like this exist to ensure that you are, making sure there's no bias in the system? So what's the number of categories that you guys have right now?
Yeah. So while at a large macro level, if I talk about, the food has 8 categories, but then if I go into the subcategories and the formats and all of that, they would be pretty much more than 500 or 1000. right? Because you will have multiple types of subcategory and subcategory and all those patterns, right? So that's like a taxonomy of food, so to speak.
Got it.
And if you do the similar thing for the beauty and personal care, for example, if you do it for skin care or hair care, then again you will have multiple categories and subcategories coming in there.
Got it. Can you take us through a case study where you guys were able to showcase potential trend that was coming in, and how did a company X act upon it, and what has been the value add of
Okay.
AI in this?
Got it. Okay. So I can talk about two case studies actually. One of them focused on identifying the emerging opportunities and shortening of the NPD cycle itself, while the second one I can focus more in terms of the screening using the AI as a capability. So let me start with the first one, which is about the shortening of NPD as a whole. So this essentially happened around the COVID time period, and as you know, in the COVID, we couldn't have organized any of the market research processes because it was all locked down, and there was no congregation of people that could happen. And the customer at that point of time was Diageo, and Diageo, as you know, is one of the world's largest alcoholic beverage companies in the world, which owns a brand like Guinness, Johnny Walker, to name a few. And this particular work was for the Smirnoff brand, which is a vodka based brand. And the team of the Smirnoff, they wanted to understand the trends which are there in the cocktail mixers, for the vodka cocktail mixers. And they essentially were looking for two key markets, Thailand and the Indonesia market. And one of the biggest challenges which they had is they wanted to do all of this within 6 months. They wanted to actually launch the product in the 6 month time period itself. So using the AI Palette platform, they firstly tried to understand what are the different trends which are out there in these two markets. And they did not just look at only alcoholic beverage, but they also looked at beverage as a category, because sometimes there is a lot of cross-category inspiration or cross-category influence which happens from beverage to alcoholic beverage, right? So using the AI Palette platform, they were able to do like a deep dive into the each of the key geographic market, and they went through the millions of the data points, filtered out through the different filters that we had on the platform, and they identified the emerging opportunities. And again, these emerging opportunities appeared in terms of not just social media, but also in terms of what are the kind of search queries which are happening from the consumers in those markets. Similarly, trying to understand about the bar menus, even though the bars were not open, but the menus were there. So trying to understand what kind of trends are there on those menus. Trying to also understand what are the D2C brands, what are they launching in the market. So based on all of this 360-degree view, the Smirnoff team was able to identify two potential opportunities. The first was the yuzu citrus, and the second was the pink grapefruit, right? So these were the two flavor line extension which they launched in the Thailand and the Indonesia market. And it overall, by the way, resulted in close to 6 months of time saving when it comes to the new product launch cycle itself. And even in terms of the budget as well, right? They were able to do it at around 50% of the budget, which they would have otherwise spent in the traditional market research. And the two products were hugely successful in both of these markets. And they ended up launching the products into the other Southeast Asia market as well, which means, and also the Asia market for that matter. So these two products were also launched in the China market as an example, right? So this is one area in which AI was able to really reduce the NPD time itself, right from months and quarters down to like weeks and days, right? And this is the power of AI coming at play.
Because I wanted to understand how that entire success played out. So for example, if I'm a marketing head or a brand manager who's using AI Palette, looking at the trend, I still will not have the confidence whether this will be successful or will this fail, right? Or is AI Palette giving me 100% confidence key, go with these two flavors, you will definitely hit your success?
Okay, got it. So the primary KPI that we target for the brand managers and the insights manager is the time reduction. So for example, if something that would have taken them to, let's say, do the market research in 6 months, we are able to give them in days or weeks, right? So that's the primary KPI which they go after. Secondly, when it comes to the trend identification, we give them different types of trends, but ultimately it's the human who decides out of these
Okay.
trends which is the one which is going to fit best with their brand personality.
So, as a marketing head or a brand manager, I look at these. Let's say I've identified 5 trends. I will still have to do a focus group activity or a consumer research on ground to test out what the consumers are thinking and feeling about these new products or new flavors that I'm going to release. Or you're saying that we can completely eliminate it.
Goal. So I would say a part of it would still happen. You would still need to rely upon the human
Okay.
market research, but the scope of it would vary. So what I mean by that is, today, for example, using AI Palette, you can look at these 5,000 different trends which are based on millions of data points, and using that you can filter down to, let's say, 20 different concepts. And out of those 20, also you can then understand which are the top concepts, right? Now you're able to do all of that 0 to 80% of work in days and weeks. Of course, that remaining 20% of the work where you will need like a actual testing of a flavor with the real consumers, that will still need to happen, right? To really understand the how the users are perceiving the taste part of it and the taste profiles and all of that, right? So that
Right.
part will continue to remain. But what we are really doing is we are essentially changing or crunching down the time which it takes for the 0 to 80%, which can be
No,
done at
not
days and
the
weeks.
taste, but even the flavor profiles. Let's say there are 5 flavor profiles,
Hmm.
and if I have to figure out should I release the yuzu or something else or a Z taste that I have picked up,
Hmm.
I still have to do a focus group testing, right? I won't be able to look at AI Palette and say that out of these 5, let's pick these 2. This will definitely do well in the market. Is that how we can take a decision?
So again, it varies from company to company. In some of the companies, we have seen that they have directly replaced also the market research completely with AI Palette or with the AI focused approach. However, in some of the other companies, what we have seen is while they would take the flavor inspiration, they would
Mhm.
still do a small scale study which is needed, for the rest of the process, right? But that being said, one very important point to note is that market research you cannot do for each and every experiment because it's very expensive process and it takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
Using the AI, it gives you the capability to run as many experiments as you want.
Understood. Interesting. Okay, let's move on to your second case study.
Sure. So the second case study is related to a brand which I'm sure all of us really love, which is the Kit Kat brand. So let me ask you a question, Zunez. Do you know how many flavors of Kit Kat are there in the world?
I've seen a lot right now. I'm guessing there's around 20, 25 maybe.
Yeah, so the correct answer is 400.
There's
And
400 Kit Kat
yes.
flavors. Oh my god. Okay.
Yeah, and you should definitely visit Japan to see some of those really quirky flavors which are out there, which includes a matcha flavor also, by the way, of Kit Kat.
Right.
Right. And I'm happy to say that the AI palette played a role in one of the identification of the Kit Kat flavors and the successful launch of the same. So this essentially happened in the US market for the Hershey's brand. So by the way, the Kit Kat as a globally is owned by Nestle, but only for the US it is owned by Hershey's as a company. And Hershey's essentially wanted to understand what next flavor of Kit Kat they should launch in the market. So what they did is they went through a platform, which again they went through USA Bakery, because bakery is where a lot of confectionery inspiration come from. So using the USA Bakery, they were able to look at what kind of trends which are out there. Out of the the millions of data points and the 500 and 1,000 plus ingredients and culinary inspiration, they were able to identify close to 50 different types of trend which they could then take it forward. Out of those 50, then they created and generated product concepts. They generated around 21 different product concepts. Now what I mean by a product concept, it is a combination of the ingredient with a certain format, right? So for example, matcha latte will be a product or a product format or a concept compared to, let's say, matcha as an ingredient, right? So in that way, they were able to identify these product concepts generations along with the packaging design. And finally, using the screen winner, they were able to identify 3 different opportunities which are there for the Kit Kat as a brand. And out of which they ended up launching the blueberry muffin Kit Kat flavor. And initially, it was launched as a limited time offering. What I mean by that is it was supposed to be launched for maybe 3 months or even less time period, but it became so popular that they ended up becoming like a regular feature. So even today, for example, like, you can go on to the US and you will find that this particular product is there in one of the offerings of the Amazon US website. And if you also look at the reviews of this product on Amazon, it was one of the favorite and the highest selling products of the KitKat in the 2023 year. This was launched in that particular year. And the rating was close to 4.4 on Amazon. And people also spoke about how this is very nostalgic. It reminds them of the blueberry muffin, like, as a dessert, and they would, like, become really nostalgic about the entire experience of having this. So this was
Right.
again one of the, case studies in which we were able to not just identify, but also generate and then screen the entire end-to-end process, which happened in days compared to, like, months and years that otherwise it would have taken.
This is very interesting to see the amount of data that you guys are going through to identify these patterns, because today every day there is something new that's coming up. So I wanted to know, how do you define a trend versus a short-lived signal? Like, when do you say that, okay, this is not a trend, let's ignore this?
Yeah. So, firstly, I mean, if I were to answer this in, like, one single line, right, it would be that hype is something which will be very, very loud or very short-lived, while trends will be something which is steady, right? Now, what I mean by that, so for example, we have our own AI classification. This is our own proprietary way in which how we are really measuring how the trends are and what life cycle they really fall into, right? And we classify the trends again into multiple stages, whether it is a dormant, emerging, growing, mature, declining, and fading, right?
Okay.
Now, what are the three different ways in which what are the three primary factors based on which we classify? So the first is volume, the second is the velocity, and the third is the 360-degree view, right? So let me explain each of these bit. Now, volume again is very simple, right? Essentially, we look at how many people are talking about it, whether it is on social media, whether it is on search, or if it is food service, retail, and all that, right? So that's one way to look at it. The second is we look at the velocity, which means how this particular trend is growing. So it's not just about having a very large volume, but how it is growing month over month, week over week, because we are collecting all of this data on a daily basis. So we try to understand how that growth momentum is really happening. And we look at a window of 4 years and 2 years when we are doing this. So what I mean by that is we are not just looking for something in last 3 months. When we are looking at a consistent growth, we are looking at a longer duration, which could be over a year time frame, right? Compared to anything which is coming up maybe for a month and then dying down, right? Or it
Right.
could be very seasonal also sometimes. So that's one way in which we are looking at the velocity. And the third important factor is the 360-degree view, which is where we are looking at not just only about the social media. So for example, if something is becoming very popular on Instagram or TikTok, that does not mean that it will automatically become like a growing trend for us, because we will also look at what's happening on the search. Are menus actually talking about it? So is this something which is becoming popular in the culinary space? We also look at some product releases. Is there any product out there being launched by any D2C brand or any regional brand for that matter? And we also look at what are the kind of reviews which are being talked about, if there are any products which are out there. Similarly, we would look at what are the kind of search queries. Are people really searching for it or not? Even in case of, let's say, the social media, we would look at how much of it is being influencer driven and how much of it is organic, right? Are regular users talking about it, or is it just influencers who are talking about it? Because then you can understand what is actually going to make an impact or not. So based on all of the 360-degree view, and of course, combining it with the volume and the velocity, we are then classifying the trends into these multiple buckets. And then we also predict for the next 1 year, like how this particular trend is going to look like. And there again, we are looking at a combination of cross category and cross geography as a factor. Now, again, the cross geography is more about, and if I talk about Asia as a whole, right, like a lot of trends of food, they start in the Japan and the Korea, then they would travel down to Thailand, Indonesia, Singapore, Malaysia, and all that, right? So we are trying to understand what's happening in Japan and how it could populate down to these Asia markets, right? So that's one way of looking at the prediction. The second is we are looking at cross-category influence, right? So, for example, beverage to alcoholic beverage, or whether it is from bakery to confectionery. So all of these also will take into account when we predict. And so based on all of this, essentially we are able to filter out what is going to be like a short-lived hype compared to like a sustainable growth, right? So for example, if I talk about Dalgona coffee, now that became very popular for a couple of months or for some time period during the COVID time period, right? But as
Mhm.
soon as COVID restrictions would go down, we would see suddenly it would drop, right? Compared to, let's say, something like a plant-based milk, right, which was seeing like a continuous growth over a period of time. There were very small brands that have started to introduce the product, and then followed by, of course, like, cafes, groceries, and everywhere it started to appear. So that's one way in which we are able to essentially filter out these types of trends.
Got it. So you only classify it as a trend if you see a sustainable growth across a 3 or a 6 month or a 1 year life cycle. You don't classify it as a trend if you see an initial spike.
So we would classify it, but then it would be dormant.
Got it.
It
Got
won't fall into like a emerging or a growing. Of course, like, something which is really growing very fast could still go into emerging. But then
Mhm.
when we are speaking to our customers, we also tell them that the area for you, if you want to play it safe, will be something like a growing or a matured compared to emerging and a dormant, which are still playing out.
Got it. Got it. So I think a question I think a lot of my community will have is that should researchers be afraid? Is this AI palette going to take away a lot of the market research opportunities that they have?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, yeah, that's a classical question, and of course, like, everyone has their own doom scenarios played out in their mind about the Terminator and all of that. But to be
Right.
very honest with you, we are far away from that reality today. I think today AI is a very great collaborator, and not just a collaborator. I think it's a force multiplier. What I mean by that is the 1+1 is not just equal to 2, but equal to 3, right? So a
Mhm.
human and a AI as a combination can actually, like, make you more effective compared to just AI alone or a human alone, because everyone has their own superpowers, right? So for example, if I talk about the AI, it is really good at going through millions of these data points, spotting the patterns, the early patterns which are there, and also removing all the grunt work which used to be there, right? Now
Right.
compare that to the human. Now humans obviously have their own storytelling as a power, they have their own understanding of the empathy, and even the cultural signals, which sometimes the AI might not be able to understand. And finally, the strategic judgment, right? Like whether this would work or whether this will fit more with my brand personality or not. Right. So all of that becomes very, very important if you, like, combine the two, which is where AI becomes good at analyzing the data, but then
Mhm.
human decides what to make out of those signals, right? Like which is the right signal out of the multiple signal which the AI is giving you. And that is what we are also seeing in multiple companies that we are working with, right? So in all of the companies that we work with today, the customers that we are working with, we have not replaced any human as such, right? The market researchers are still there as a team, but what they are doing is they're using us to either replace a part of their traditional market research budget, or they are using it in a way to run more experiments. So let's say in the past, if I, as a Nestle brand manager or a consumer insights manager, I could only do let's say 5 market research in the entire year using the AI palette. Now I can do maybe 500 or even 1000, because I can run multiple experiments throughout the platform. I can like, essentially do this much more at a much higher scale, right? So that's the way in which we are really seeing the change evolve, like, in these companies. And it's more like the AI pilot is like that 24/7 analyst which is always running in the background, right? And that's where the strategic impact of the market researcher becomes important, because they use the insights from the AI palette and then apply their own judgment.
Got it. Got it. So when you say run experiments within AI palette, what does that exactly mean? Like, are they sending out some social media posts or ads and seeing what the results are? What is experiments within AI palettes?
Yeah. So essentially, the way that AI pilot really helps is, it's not just about innovation, which is launching the new product in the market, but it is also about the renovation, right? Like, how can you position the existing product in a different way, right? Without changing the product itself, right? Whether it is in terms of marketing communication or a line, like, or about the marketing language that you might be using for your own product, right? So
Mhm.
what I mean by that is, let's say, for example, today everyone is talking about protein as an example, right? Everyone is talking about the gut health. Now maybe as a product, as a consumer product, you were already having protein, but then maybe you were not talking about it, very actively and vocally on your positioning, right? So how can you look at what's happening on AI palette, what the consumers are talking about, and use that as an input to start changing your marketing language, right? And then you can also visualize all of these concepts on a platform, right? So it's not like you have to go to a market agency or a creative agency to create all of these, whether it is a marketing template or whether it is creating a product concept. You can generate all of that on a platform, which is the Concept Genie, which is again powered by the generative AI. So you can
Okay.
visualize it, you can look at the language, you can also customize it according to the target group. Let's say whether you are targeting a Gen Z or you are targeting a millennial, right? So you can play around with that language and you can essentially generate that pamphlet or that marketing communication, which you can then launch either on a social media or on the the different channels that you might have. So this is what I mean by the experiments, which in the past might have taken you a longer, because you would have gone to a traditional market research, which would have taken you again months to really understand.
Got it. And I'm also guessing that the AI palette's ability to spot trends is also very strong because of your base architecture and the data from where you are bringing in these trends. Because if you had missed out some of the key themes or some of the key data points, I think the trend capture would not have been so successful and accurate. So I think at the end of the day, there is a human at play to build this
Yeah.
entire engine which is able to spot these trends. So I want to know about these humans who started building this AI palette. Like, where did you guys start from? It seems like there's so much of data points coming together, and
Yeah.
I'm guessing your background is also not from CPG. So what was your earlier growth like, and where did you guys start with your data collection and everything?
Okay, got it. So maybe I can talk about the background firstly, about my background, and then of course of the co-founder. So I come from a AI and a fintech background. Before this, I was working at Visa Data Labs, where
Mhm.
essentially I was working on petabyte scale data and working with the fintech data, right? So from the time you swipe your card or tap your card to the time it gets deducted from a bank account, there is this huge amount of data footprint which is generated, right? And Visa as a company would use and leverage all of that to do multiple analytics on top of it. So that
Mhm.
is how I got exposed to the data firsthand, and also about predicting which trends, fintech trends, are going to be more popular in the future, right? So that was my exposure to the fintech as a domain and AI as a domain. And in 2015 to 2018, I was in Bangalore. So this was also my first job, by the way. And any AI conference that I would go to, I only saw the fintech AI startups. And I always used to wonder, where are the other AI startups? Why are we not seeing any AI startup in manufacturing or in some other domain? And in 2018, then I quit my job with the foresight that it is only a matter of time when AI will come in other industries also and it will disrupt it. Right. So with that foresight, I quit my job and moved to Singapore. And this was part of the Entrepreneur First program, which is a accelerator program of sort. And there at the program in Singapore, I met my co-founder Som. Now Som comes from a FMCG background. He essentially worked for this company called Givaudan, which is an ingredient and a flavor and a fragrance house. And this is a Swiss-based company, but again, because of the experience, he did get exposed to multiple FMCG companies as a whole. And when Som and I got started discussing and brainstorming, one thing we realized is, by speaking to whether it is a Fortune 500 company or a smallest D2C brand, that one of their big pain point was the NPD process and how do they cut down the time on the research, right? Because that is very expensive and it takes a lot of time. And by the time they launch the product in the market, the product has already failed, right? Or the trend has, people have moved on with the trend. So that is where the foresight started coming in, that how we can use AI to really cut down the time period, right? And from there, then we started building out the hypothesis. Again, it was very, you can say it started very small, as any journey does. So, for example, when we started with only one category in one country, right? We started with, let's say Thailand beverage as an example, right? And slowly over a period of time, we started adding more and more country, more and more category. Obviously, a part of it also helped that we got a references from multiple customers, right? So, for example, if we work with Diageo in the Thailand, Then they referred us to the Indonesia team. From Indonesia, they referred us to Australia. From Australia, they referred us to Europe and US and Latin America, right? So that's one of the ways in which we were able to expand from one country to another category. And similar thing happened for even the category as well, right? We started with beverage, alco beverage, but then customers started asking us about the snacks. They started asking us about bakery, confectionery, sauces, seasoning and condiment. And now in the very recent time period, by the way, we have added pet food and baby food, right? Which is where we were seeing a lot of interest coming in. Nutraceuticals is again a big thing, which is happening, right? So you can see a part of it also happened because of how the market was pulling us into, like where the market was really taking us and how the customers were really showcasing their interest. And the data also obviously kept on getting refined, right? So it's not like we started with the perfect data lake on day one. Obviously, we saw our own set of experiments. For example, when we had started, we had only limited amount of social media data, search data, and some part of recipes and all that. But then we also started seeing a lot of interest coming from customers around the e-commerce because they wanted to understand what's happening on e-commerce side. So then we integrated all of the e-commerce data. In some of the platform, they wanted us to include like a blogs and forums where people are talking about it. And this is very specific to like a baby care and a baby food, where there are multiple blogs related to the parenting, right? So you have to include all of these blogs to really understand the trends which are out there. So I think it was all a gradual process over a period of time. And again, like, we hired people from both the backgrounds, right? We had people like the best AI scientists, the data scientists, but on the other side, we also hired people who are coming in from consumer insights background, right? So based on that, obviously the product continued to get developed because the consumer insights would allow us and help us to explain how we should think about the taxonomy, what kind of data set should we really collect, which will help in the better understanding of the customers, right? So it was a collaborative process, which obviously happened over a period of time.
Interesting. So today, if there's a new category that you have to enter, like for example, let's say pet food, where do you guys start from? Do you already have enough data to give you that kickstart, or is there a initial data architecture or a pipeline that you guys have to sit together, figure out what it is, and then build it out?
Yeah. So anything which is now in food and beverage or beauty and personal care, because we have already built out a lot of these frameworks and architectures and pipeline, it is there for us to integrate, right? We need to still fine tune the AI models and collect more relevant data, but we do have some starting data to begin with, which we are able to leverage. However, if it's a completely new vertical like fashion, as an example, there, of course, we will have to start from scratch. But anything which is more of food and beverage and CPG, that we are able to capture much more earlier.
Oh, nice. So I wanted to also understand, since in 2018 you had that foresight that AI is going to come into CPG and other markets as well. What is your foresight today? What is the next 5 years going to look like? What is the trend? What should we be all looking forward to building and working in?
Got it. Yeah. So on the other day, I was discussing with few of my founder friends, right, about what could be the future of AI and especially around this agents, right, which are appearing everywhere and anywhere for that matter. Now, I have a very strong hypothesis that every one of us will have our own personalized agents. What that means is, for example, you will have your own agent which will do the things on behalf of you, right? Which means that if you want to travel, then the agent would book the ticket, it would add it to your calendar, it would make the payment and all of that, right? Similarly, if you want to organize more podcast sessions, then it would find the right host for you, it would find the right kind of speakers, do all the outreach and obviously bring them here and everything, right? So that is my strong conviction. Now, all of this is going to happen for all the millions and billions of population that is out there. Now, how would this really change the market research process itself? Now, the way that I really foresee the market research process changing is that the companies are going to start engaging with these agents, right? Today, for example, we are engaging with the with the limited set of people, like a 50 to 100 people that we are getting in a room. But imagine if I have my own personalized agent, which understands me better than myself, by the way, right? Because it will have access to all my history and everything, of course, with the security aspects being considered and all of that. Now, assume that agent is directly able to speak to the market researchers and able to give them understanding or answer the questions that they might have, or give more insights about myself, and do it across an aggregated pool, and also do it in a way which is anonymized, right? So that my personal identity is not getting revealed. Right now, imagine all of that happening across millions of data points, and I also get paid for that. Like my agent gets paid for, like, providing whatever the survey or the time period. Now, this would be, like, really a game changer, because then it exposes companies to the millions of consumers, where they are also able to compensate them, and they are able to understand in near real time, because all of these interactions could really happen, like, very, very fast, right? So this is where I feel the market research could really evolve to the next frontier itself, which is where it becomes more of a agentic AI way of doing the market research. And of course, like, the market researchers will still continue to play a big role, because they will try to understand what kind of questions should be asked to the agents, right? So framing the questions properly becomes even more important, and the AI will continue to play a role, because we will still need to understand and collate all of that data with what the consumers are really doing, right? So what they are talking about in the surveys and the, like, in the virtual environment that you create, plus what they are actually doing in their real life, whether it is on social media, search, and all of that, that will still continue to be there. But you are able to triangulate all of that and understand what is going to happen, like, to the different trends out there. So I think this is definitely going to be very interesting in the next 5 to 10 years, as we continue to be more and more ingrained with the agentic AI frameworks.
So I've thought about this as well, but my concern with this is that we will be living in a very capitalistic world, right? So the agents will be the one taking decisions for us, and we won't have, it's not about control. We won't think which are the brands that we're picking from. Let me give you an example of, let's say I want to travel to a specific place. The only thing I want to do is experience going for a trekking, and I ask my agent to do all the bookings. How the agent chooses which flight I book, which hotels I stay in, what I eat, what are the places that I visit, will it be driven by what I want to do or what companies are providing? And would it be a decision that the companies and brands with the loudest voice and highest market share will drive?
Yeah. So and that's the reason why I said the, like, the offline experience will still remain. What I mean by the offline is what we are doing on social media and search, all of that will still remain relevant. Now, this particular example, let's say, for example, I am a, like, a coffee person, right? Now, I already have a certain set of coffee which I have been, like, consuming, right? And there are my favorites. Now, all of that history is already there on my Zomato and Swiggy and all of that, right? Now, imagine getting access of the agent to all of that history and understanding what are my preferences of the coffee. And then when the companies are understanding, like, what kind of coffee is being, like, being consumed by Himanshu, as an example, they can understand that from the history. So that is what I meant, that all of us are leaving some sort of digital footprint in the products that we are consuming, and this digital footprint will continue to evolve and even become better. Now, agent having access to all of that and being able to then provide that information at a obviously a monetary compensation to these brands will be a new way of doing the market research, is what I'm trying to say.
Interesting. So how will marketing, etc., look? Will you be marketing to consumers, or will you be figuring out SEOs to, do a digital marketing to the agents?
Very interesting question. I think definitely there would be a way in which the companies are also doing the, like, the similar strategy, right? They are targeting the agents now compared to the human, and like, trying to influence the agents with their own budgets and everything, right? And ensuring that they are, like, the ones that they are targeting. But again, like, and like you rightly mentioned, right, there could be a possibility that the agents are getting influenced because of the bigger market voice or the larger market share, etc., like happening by the bigger brands, and then not getting enough representation. And that's the reason why I said in the beginning that it will still be the offline and online integration. Like, the humans will crave for more offline offline experiences. Like, for example, even today, right, I see a lot of my friends, they go for Vipassana and, like, all of this retreats, right? And they, like, continue to enjoy it. And I think in the future, when we become more and more integrated with technology, a lot of that offline experiences will become even more bigger, right? So things like the concert economy, the experience economy, all of this will continue to happen at a much larger scale, and we humans also will crave for that. So the offline will still happen, and we will continue to leave these the footprints there. So our preference will continue to be there. The agents will pick up everything which is happening on the online side of it. So ultimately it will matter a lot on how the companies are really influencing it and who is having the final say. Obviously we will want to be remain in charge of the agent and not the other way around, right, where the agent is controlling us. So if
Right.
humans are controlling the agent, then the problem that you're talking about might not happen, because we will still know whether we want to go for a Fortune 500 brand or a D2C brand. But if it's more about agent getting influenced with the advertisements and all of that, then obviously it would be a very different story getting played out.
Yeah, because I'm imagining the agent would not say that, hey, there is a new coffee brand from one of the big brands. It would just say, hey, Himanshu, there's a new coffee brand which has a very similar flavor that you like. Would you like to experiment? Can the agent influence your decision? Because at the end of the day, you can give behavioral cues to push a human to think through or to make a decision which is more favorable for you. Can agents become very manipulative in the future to make you take certain decisions that's more favorable for the companies?
So I think again and this is again on the borderline of the AGI, right, where agents
Right.
will start having their own. I mean, AI will start having its own consciousness and all of that. But leaving that aside, what I still feel, which is going to be very very important, is that humans will continue to fine tune the agents in their own way. What I mean by that is, for example, if I have a experimental personality, right, and if I like to experiment around my brands, I would want to provide the same recommendation to my agent as well, right? If I am of that sort, right? And same thing goes for maybe someone who is not maybe an experimental person, but they are more like a filter coffee person, right? And that is what they would feed into that system. So I think it will also depend on how we humans are training or fine tuning these agents, and what is the kind of information we are providing to them, so then they continue that flow in the same way, right? Of course, until the time when the agents get influenced in their own manner, which is something more of a sci-fi scenario. But assuming that does not happen, I feel that humans will still be able to train it in a certain manner.
Interesting. So if this scenario plays out, will there be a change in the way AI Palette is capturing trends? Because now it won't be just humans talking about or picking certain trends. There will be a lot of influence from agents as well. Do you see a change in the way how your entire architecture would play out?
Definitely, yes. We would have to, and that's the reason why we have already started working on some of the agentic AI products, right? While those are more focused on the customer today, but what we are doing is we are building out these capabilities of integrating and looking at the agent to agent communications, right? So what I mean by that is, today, for example, if AI Palette has its own data pool and we have our own agent, how can that agent talk to a customer agent? Or how can it talk to a agent which is from some other company, right? So having that agent to agent communication is something that we are already working on in terms of integration. Because at the end of the day, what is going to happen at a much broader scale is you will have agents speaking to agents in all of these nodes, right? You will have all of these. If you think like a human as a node and the agent, so attached to it, and you will have all of these millions and billions of communication, and everyone is talking to each other and maybe talking to the company. So it's all about solving for that agent to agent communication, right? And that is what we have already started working on right now, and that is what we will start facilitating these companies with, that we can help you to connect with these agents rather than them having to worry about all the headache of communicating with each of them.
Oh, interesting. So how many people already have their own agents? Do you have already an agent that is picking and choosing things for you?
So I think there was very recently this launch of Moltbot, right, which was more like Claude, and I think they also changed the name to Claude Bot and whatnot. And it was sort of like a a glimpse into the future, so to speak, because using that agent, you could actually host it locally on your system, and then you could start automating certain things, right? So for example, one of the things which I used it for automation is I integrated it with my WhatsApp, and then I used to send out like timely reminders to my mother that I have had my breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and because which she would keep on asking me every time. So this is a very simple application. Of course, we are seeing lot more complicated applications starting to happen, where people are now starting to order food end to end, right? Like they are scheduling like a coffee to happen every single morning through the Swiggy MCP and whatnot.
Yeah.
This is something right now I have not gone at that scale. I think I have been at a more experimental stage right now, which is more about the WhatsApp related automations and notifications. But that's something which I'm sure in the future, will continue to happen for me as well, and for all the millions of consumers also.
Okay, one final question. Does your mom know this is automated messages or is it from you? Is she aware?
Very good question. So I think initially she she was a little I think because there was some error notification that went along, so she did get confused why she's receiving those. But I think now that I have customized it in a way where it is English, right? So it's not just Hindi
Oh,
or
interesting.
English, but it's like a English, right? So which is how I also speak to my mother. So now she's not able to differentiate.
Crazy. Oh, this is a very fun experiment and space that you're in, and I think there's a lot more that you are up to and you're planning to build in the future. So I'm excited to follow your journey, and if anyone wants to follow your journey, where's the best place to follow you?
So LinkedIn and Twitter are the two active platforms on which I regularly talk about. If you want to understand more about the book related things, then you can also follow me on Instagram, which is where I write about the different books that I'm reading and all of that. But LinkedIn obviously be more of a professional if you want to explore anything related to AI and all of that.
Oh, lovely. Do share your channels. I'll upload it on the links as well. So thank you so much for sharing your vision and the kind of work that you're doing. It seems like an exciting but still a scary world that we're all getting into. So I think it's time for everyone to upskill and get used to how things are going to be in the future, whether we like it or not. So thank you so much, Himanshu, for your time.
Thank you so much, Junezio, for the opportunity.